and undermining of Palestinian self-determination began in 1948 with the creation of Israel as a settler colony. It has gotten worse ever since then, as Israel's apartheid regime continues to unfold. In Gaza today, we are witnessing how Israel is using starvation as one of its tools to commit genocide. We have never seen a civilian population made to go hungry so quickly and completely compared to any other place in the world in modern history. Now, children are starting to die from malnutrition and dehydration, which indicates that famine is already striking Gaza, or at least famine is around the corner. We have never seen children pushed into malnutrition so quickly anywhere else in the world. How did this happen? Israel is not only restricting and blocking the flow of humanitarian aid, it is targeting and destroying the food system in Gaza, making it impossible for people to feed themselves now, and very difficult for people to feed themselves in the future. Israel is decimating and poisoning agricultural land and orchards. Israel has destroyed approximately 75% of the fishing fleets of small fishers in Gaza. When you examine the situation in terms of Palestinian people's food sovereignty, you get a better understanding of what is at stake. You also get a better sense of how to use human rights to create the conditions for peace and a life of dignity for all peoples, and I use that in the plural, all peoples who live between the Jordan River and Mediterranean Sea. The reason Israel could make 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza go hungry so quickly and completely is because Israel was already strangling Gaza through a 17-year blockade, keeping everyone on the precipice of hunger. Before the war, 50% of people in Gaza were food insecure and 80% relied on humanitarian aid. But Israel's attacks against the Palestinian people and attempts to undermine their food sovereignty is not only restricted to Gaza. Last year, and now going into this year, we are seeing record degrees of violence by Israeli settlers and Israeli armed forces against Palestinians in occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. This is an escalation of attacks. There is an escalation of attacks against Palestinian peasants and pastoralists. This year, peasants were not able to harvest their olives in the West Bank. Olives are, of course, an important source of food and livelihood, but the Palestinian people's relationship to olive trees, which can live for hundreds of years, is about the Palestinian people's relationship to their land, to their ancestors, and to the future. The olive tree is one central aspect of what it means to be Palestinian and Palestinian food sovereignty. I will add that small-scale fishing and access to the Mediterranean Sea is another central aspect of Palestinian food sovereignty. As reflected in the UN Declaration of the Rights of Peasants and other people working in rural areas, food sovereignty is deeply interconnected with the right to food. One way to think about food sovereignty is as a particular articulation of a people's right to self-determination. The power and authority of food sovereignty does not derive from the political form of the state or a national authority. Food sovereignty arises from people's long-standing relationship with the land, with the rivers and the sea, and their ability to feed their communities. Food sovereignty is about securing collective tenure and territorial rights. Since food sovereignty is inherently linked to human rights, all states have an obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill those collective land tenure and territorial rights. Today, when we are talking about the Palestinian people's food sovereignty, we are in effect talking about how to make the Palestinian people stronger. My warmest thank you to the co-sponsors of this event, the governments of Ireland, Qatar, Pakistan, and the state of Palestine. We're going to begin with opening remarks from Ambassador Noel White from Ireland, Ambassador Hend Abdalrahman al-Muftah from Qatar, and Ambassador Bilal Ahmad from Pakistan. We'll then hear from our panelists. We're honored to have Yasmeen el-Hassan, representative from the Union of Agricultural Work Committees in Ramallah. She'll provide a perspective from the Palestinian peasants. Ahmed Abofoul is a legal researcher from al-Haq, a Ramallah-based human rights organization. He'll provide the broader international legal context of Palestine and the Palestinian people's liberation struggle. Hend Mohamadieh is a legal advisor with the Third World Network and will discuss the role of corporations in the occupation of Palestinian territories. And as the Right to Food community knows all too well, corporate power is one of the greatest threats to food sovereignty. And then Ambassador Ibrahim Khraishi from the State of Palestine will provide concluding remarks. Thank you. With that, we'll turn to Ambassador White.
Special Rapporteur Michael, thank you very much, and thank you for taking the initiative to bring this meeting together here today. We very much welcome the opportunity as well to work with you and to co-sponsor this event, and the opportunity it gives us to bring attention to this extremely important topic. It's not only important, it's timely, of course. I'll make some brief remarks as you have requested. There are several speakers here who I know the audience want to hear from, but it's a welcome opportunity just to set out some of our overlying concerns at this point. It is clear that the humanitarian situation in Gaza is now catastrophic. It's estimated that the entire population in the Gaza Strip, or 2.2 million, are currently facing high levels of acute food insecurity. This, in short, is the highest share of people facing high levels of acute food insecurity that has ever been classified for any given area or country. We know that the military operations that have taken place since 9 October have had catastrophic impacts on an already precarious food production capacity in Gaza, as well as on the ability of people to access food. Humanitarian food assistance, which is already supporting over 2/3 of the population, has dramatically decreased and is now extremely inadequate to cover the rapidly growing and life-threatening needs. Before this latest and worst conflict, 16 years of a blockade had already impacted the supply of food, water services, and essential infrastructure, which is required for agricultural activities in Gaza. 97% of natural water supply was unfit for human consumption, and that is by WHO standards. Deteriorating socioeconomic conditions, intensified of course by the blockade and periodic hostilities, meant that access to food in Gaza has remained a challenge for the majority of Palestinian refugees in Gaza. Today, UNRWA is a lifeline for the people of Gaza, and last month Ireland announced 20 million euros in core funding to support UNRWA in 2024. Ireland has repeatedly expressed its concern at the suspension of funding to UNRWA at this crucial time. We are a long-standing supporter of UNRWA, and our support remains steadfast. We therefore strongly welcome the decision of the European Commission yesterday, announced on the 1st of March, to release 50 million for UNRWA, part of the 82 million euros of EU funding to UNRWA for this year, as well as 68 million euros for other international agencies working in the region. This, we believe, is the right action and the right signal. The hostilities are the main driver of the extremely high levels of acute food insecurity in Gaza. In order for Palestinian people to regain food sovereignty, there must be a ceasefire. Humanitarian access and the provision of basic services must be ensured in order to address the most urgent needs of food insecurity and to create the environment that would allow Palestinians to achieve food sovereignty into the future. A stable socioeconomic environment is difficult to envisage without the realization of a two-state solution endorsed by the UN Security Council, which foresees a safe and secure Israel and an independent, democratic, contiguous, viable and sovereign Palestinian state living side by side in peace. This vision must remain visible. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much, Dr. Michael Fakhri, for organizing this event at a very critical time. And I take this opportunity also in praising and commending your very valuable work and to bringing the world's attention to the catastrophic crisis of the Palestinian people in Gaza and on the 6th and 7th of February, Doha hosted an international congress on food justice, It was organized by Qatari National Human Rights Committee and many other partners. And one of the main issues discussed and one of the main focus is that the plight of 2.2 million besieged Palestinian people in Gaza, facing the severe shortages in water, food, and other medicine, of course, and other humanitarian supplies. So that's why having this side event as one of the sidelines of the current 55 HR session, the significance is that it really connects international human rights declaration and the international humanitarian laws, the principle that govern the right to food in wartime and occupation. Now, needless to mention that the right of food includes three interrelated and essential factors: availability, accessibility, and availability. It means that sufficient food is available, people have the means to access it, and that it adequately meets the individual dietary needs. Fulfilling these factors requires the state to protect and fulfill the right to food, both in times of war and peace. The reality is, talking within the new language, is that according to the international human rights law, the right to food is an essential part of the human right to an adequate standard of living, but it's also an effective element of the right of life. When people are not able to feed themselves in dignity and face malnutrition and starvation, their right to life will be at risk. Under the international humanitarian law, the principles that protect civilian population during armed conflict stipulates the protection of their right to food. Article 55 of the Fifth Geneva Convention states that occupying power has the duty of ensuring the food and medical supplies of the population and should bring in the necessary food, stock, medical stores, and other suppliers whenever the resources are in shortage. However, this is not the situation in Gaza. After destroying almost all the basic infrastructure, killing more than 30,000 innocent civilians, and displacing 2 million, now the occupying power has launched a food war in Gaza. Over 150 days into the war, Israel is systematically and deliberately destroying Gaza's food system. According to the most recent comprehensive new analysis released by the Global Nutrition Cluster in February, and here are the facts, what's these? 90% of children under the age of 2, 90% of the pregnant and breastfeeding women face severe food poverty, and 1 in 6 children in northern Gaza is actually malnourished, with 95% of households are limiting meals and portion size, and 64% eating only 1 meal a day. Mothers in Gaza and Rafah are struggling to find clean water and baby formula for their newborns. Many people are eating animal food to survive. Other UN agencies statistics declare that Gaza's entire population is currently classified as facing either crisis, emergency, or catastrophic level of food security. UNICEF that the Gaza side is on a brink of a nutrition crisis. WFP suspended life-saving food aid deliveries of northern Gaza a few days ago. OSHA estimated that at least 2.4 Palestinians in Gaza are really suffering a real starvation. To be honest with you, currently every single person in Gaza is hungry and starving. This is a brutal crime that should neither be tolerated nor be unpunished. The use of food as a war weapon and the starvation of the civilian population is a war crime, a crime against humanity and an act of genocide according to the international criminal law. Israeli forces are destroying, as you mentioned, Dr. Michael, and blocking access to the free land and sea, where 22% of agricultural land and 70% of fishing fleet has been quit. Israel should be held accountable for that, away from any politicization and double standard as being used to do so. Finally, in conclusion, I would really like to say that we need an urgent action in 4 key areas. First, an immediate, comprehensive, and lasting ceasefire must be imposed. Second, forced displacement of civilians from Gaza must be stopped. Third, unimpeded and sustained access must be allowed urgently to deliver all humanitarian assistance through Gaza Strip. Fourth, provision of adequate support to UNRWA has to be made to enable this UN, the one and only UN agency that considers refugees around the world, to work effectively and efficiently. Finally, I will not elaborate much on these issues as we have some technical panelists who are more aware than myself, and they will have more background to do so. However, I would really like to say that it is the right time we live up to the responsibility entrusted to us, entrusted to the Human Rights Council, entrusted to all international community to move and end this human tragedy. It is a true moral test for all of our humanity. Thank you very much.
No.
Thank you, Excellencies, honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking Special Rapporteur Michael Fakhri for his briefing and remarks made by Ambassador File and Ambassador of Qatar. Today we are convened to deliberate on a matter of profound gravity. Amidst the ongoing conflict where death and despair loom large, there is another important story that demands our attention, a story of hunger, desperation, and the unyielding spirit of the Palestinian people in their quest for sovereignty over their basic right, the right to food. The latest reports from the World Food Programme paint a harrowing picture. More than 2.2 million individuals in Gaza are living in crisis or worse levels of acute food insecurity. Famine is imminent. Among children, 1 in every 6 under the age of 2 is suffering from acute malnutrition, which will cause effects which are irretrievable. This is not merely a crisis, it is a clarion call for our collective conscience. WFP, FAO, UNICEF, and other global partners have been at the forefront providing emergency food and cash assistance to people across Gaza and the West Bank. Despite these efforts, the reality remains stark. The ceaseless bombardment, compounded by blockades and restrictions, has led to a precarious situation where food and water are scarce and healthcare facilities are overwhelmed. The use of starvation as a method of warfare is not only evident, but appears to have been practiced by the occupying power as a deliberate tactic to exacerbate the humanitarian crisis, coercing Palestinians to abandon their homes. This reprehensible and unlawful strategy culminated in a horrific event where hundreds of individuals queuing for food were tragically targeted and killed. Moreover, the economic ramifications of the blockade have stifled local agriculture and commerce, eroding the very fabric of daily life and pushing families into a cycle of poverty and hunger. The situation in Gaza is not just a failure of humanity. It is a catastrophe that undermines the dignity and survival of an entire population. The call for an immediate ceasefire, the opening of border crossings, and the resumption of commercial cargo is not just a plea for peace. It is a demand for the right to live and the right to food. I echo the voices of the Palestinian people whose rights and aspirations have been overshadowed by the specter of conflict for far too long. Pakistan remains steadfast in its support for the Palestinian cause and their inalienable right to self-determination and sovereignty, including their sovereign right over their food resources. In closing, I once again call upon the international community to mobilize its support of the Palestinian people. It is time for us to act, not as individual nations, but as a global community, committed to upholding human rights, dignity, and justice for all. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, first of all, to Michael for hosting this event. Absolutely critical, and conversations that must continue happening. The Palestinian relationship with the land is not abstract. It is very material. We are intertwined with our ecosystem. Now, I don't say this as a metaphor or to sound poetic, but quite literally, Palestinian communities are physically rooted in our land. Our relationship with our land is not just symbolic, it's symbiotic. It's not transactional, it's reciprocal. And it is not about what we get from our land, but about what we give to our land. And as the indigenous people, we are its caretakers. Our struggle for food sovereignty is necessarily intertwined with our struggle for our national sovereignty and our self-determination. It is intentional that when we speak of this topic, we speak of food sovereignty rather than food security. Food insecurity is not due to a lack of resources. If we had sovereignty over our land, if we had sovereignty over our natural resources, Palestinians would be food secure. Gaza's population of 2.3 million, over half of whom are children, would not be facing imminent risk of starvation or dying of starvation, as they are right now. Food insecurity is a human-made crisis, and the Israeli occupation has manufactured a mass starvation of the Palestinian people in Gaza. By deliberately destroying all infrastructure for self-sustenance, the Israeli occupation is aiming to ensure that those who they do not massacre with their bombs will be killed by starvation or dehydration or disease, all of which are preventable, and all of which are happening as we speak. Israel and its co-conspirators, especially the United States, are attempting to condemn survivors of their genocidal war to a future without sustenance. This targeting, disruption, and destruction of Palestinian food systems is a tactical strategy of Israeli settler colonialism, attempting to sever the indigenous relationship with the land and the interdependence on the land, no matter the consequences. Whether the consequences are humanitarian, like the 30,000 martyrs, or environmental, like the hundreds of thousands of metric tons of planet-warming emissions produced by Israel alone in the past few months. Parallel to its genocidal war on Gaza, the Israeli occupation is taking this opportunity where the world is distracted to continue to expand its settler colonial enterprise in the West Bank at an even more aggressive pace. The around 700 Israeli-imposed movement obstacles throughout the West Bank restrict access to roads, communities, agricultural areas, urban areas, water sources, food markets, medical care, educational facilities, and other necessary services. In the Gaza Strip, the occupation destroyed all of this. In the West Bank, they are manufacturing an isolation of Palestinian communities. Settler colonialism and enables settler violence, and Israeli settler violence has skyrocketed as Israeli settlers, often accompanied by the occupation forces, terrorize Palestinian communities, frequently targeting especially agricultural land, herding communities, and the food sources. This spike in Israeli settler violence has forcibly displaced over 1,200 Palestinians in the West Bank's Area C, which is primarily agricultural. The spike in colonial aggression has also had a significant impact on the olive harvest season, which is crucial for the livelihoods of thousands of Palestinian families. Further, settlers and occupation forces are establishing new settler outposts and roads on Palestinian land in Area C, and the Israeli government has dedicated a significant amount of money towards the expansion of settlements within the West Bank. The Palestinian struggle cannot be enumerated by a GDP loss or assuaged by talk of per capita growth or humanitarian aid even. Our struggle is one of livelihood and existence. The intensity of Israeli settler colonial violence in every part of historic Palestine is enabled by the international community and institutions that are serving imperial and capitalist powers. Sanctions, arms embargo, divestment, all long overdue, all possible. These are intentional choices of the international community to allow this genocide to continue. The global systems in place as they exist right now do not function for their stated purposes, nor are the supposedly diplomatic mechanisms accurately representing the will of their people. We know that these were not created by us, nor were they created for us, nor do they serve us now. We see tens of thousands of people being massacred, and we're talking. These are choices. Genocide does not happen on accident, this is intentional. We are not calling for a return to the status quo. The status quo was settler colonialism. We must work towards a total dismantling of the occupation and all systems that enable it. And we will build a just reality. We are standing in the midst of a human-made catastrophe of unimaginable proportions, but we are a steadfast people. We care for our land, and we care for each other, and we will continue to do so until and long after Palestinian liberation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for organizing this important event and for the opportunity to address you today. For the purposes of this event, I will, I'm considering the live stream genocide in the Gaza Strip. I'll focus part of my intervention on the situation in Gaza and Israel's decades-long practices orchestrated to deny Palestinian people any form of sovereignty, including food sovereignty. But allow me first to address what I was asked to address, and most importantly, the crucial context in which this is happening. Unlike what some states wish to believe or actually behave, this, as the Secretary General of the UN pointed out, did not happen in a vacuum. The current situation is indeed the result of 75 years of Zionist settler colonialism and apartheid imposed on the Palestinian people as a whole, including refugees that are denied their right to return. This is also the result of over 56 years of Israel's longest in modern history belligerent occupation. The fact that this occupation was allowed to remain this long will remain a stain on the international community. This is also the result of over 17 years of suffocating military blockade on the Gaza Strip, where 2.3 million Palestinians live in around 365 square kilometers. To understand how difficult the situation was already before this aggression, imagine that in 2012, the UN published a report concluding that the Gaza Strip will be unlivable by 2020. We're 4 years past that, with a current medieval-like complete siege and relentless heavy indiscriminate bombardment, the equivalent of 2 nuclear bombs like that thrown in Hiroshima, only in the first 3 weeks. Coupled with Israel's officials' dangerous genocidal statements, Israel's systematic targeting of protected civilians, mostly women and children, and protected civilian objects, including hospitals, ambulances, UNRWA schools, bakeries, UNRWA food storages, and water reserves, indicate a deliberate policy of starvation being used as a method of warfare that aims at inducing the people of the Gaza Strip to leave it, with the shamelessly announced intention to ethnically cleanse them from their ancestral land and push them to the Sinai Desert. The situation on the ground in Gaza is really disastrous. People are drinking contaminated water, eating animal feed and grass. Hundreds of thousands are sheltering in UNRWA schools and hospitals, tents, and even in the streets, all of which Israel's keep bombarding to induce people to leave. The people of Gaza are facing starvation on an unprecedented scale, as the Special Rapporteur has pointed out on several occasions, while also facing the hell Israel unleashed on them from the skies, with nowhere to go and no place is safe. These are a series of war crimes and crimes against humanity, including starvation. This is another Nakba and a genocide unfolding before our eyes. The failure of some states to do the bare minimum of human decency and call for a ceasefire is not only shameful, but also scandalous and complicit. Governments who yet to call for a ceasefire have blood of Palestinian children on their hands. On food sovereignty, and briefly, whether in the Americas, Africa, Australia, or elsewhere, colonialism and its practices of domination, conquest, settlements, and exploitation of land and natural resources of the indigenous people have erupted many ecosystems and indigenous food sovereignty around the world. Some have accurately argued that colonialists owe their success in part to such criminal practices. The situation of Palestine is not an exception. Israel's several colonial practices in the occupied Palestinian territory, including its illegal settlements enterprise, have had and continue to have catastrophic consequences on the environment of the Palestinian people and their food sovereignty. Now, a few words on the Gaza Strip, if you allow me, which in my own memory, as someone who grew in Gaza, has always been known for its plain that were lush with citrus orchids, none of which exists. If you think Israel's destruction of any form of Palestinian food sovereignty is a recent or an accidental practice, think again. While Israel was engaging in peace negotiations in the 90s, which culminated to the Madrid conference, at the same time, Israel was bulldozers were systematically destroying orange and olive groves along the fence with Gaza. Also, since its illegal air, land, and sea blockade, Israel has been continuing its illegal practices, including counting the calorie intake needed for the population in Gaza, and only allowing food to that extent, effectively putting 2.3 million Palestinians on a strict diet, rather gradually starving them, a policy often described as the heads right above the water, where the Palestinians cannot swim to survive or draw to bring attention of the international community. If there is anything that would succeed in bringing the attention of the international community, to be honest. Israel has also enforced a buffer zone that extends up to 300 meters along the fence with Gaza, which has left most of Gaza's agricultural land inaccessible for Palestinian farmers. In addition, those who could still access their land close to this zone would face other serious and life-threatening challenges. Since the blockade, Gaza suffered several Israeli military aggressions that had catastrophic consequences on the population, their environment, and their food sovereignty. This includes consequences arising from Israel's illegal usage of many weapons, including white phosphorus weapons, which has been affecting air quality, destruction of water treatment facilities, damaging soil and agricultural land, leaving it either completely infertile or produce significantly lower crop yields than before, including delayed environmental impacts. In addition, Israel's herbicidal warfare in Gaza and the announced air spray of corpse-killing and cancer-causing herbicides has been complemented by the clearing of and bulldozing of agricultural land and residential land close to the eastern border of the Gaza Strip. According to the Palestinian Agriculture Ministry, since 2014, over 14,000 dunams of agricultural land in the Gaza Strip have been damaged by such sprayings. Further, crops like spinach, okra, corn, parsley, wheat, peas, you name it, were irreparably damaged, which had rendered Gaza completely reliant on food that comes from outside the Gaza Strip, rather than what Gaza used to produce for decades. This is a deliberate policy that we see the result of which today. Again, this is neither recent nor accidental. The international community has allowed this for decades. And I conclude with that. If the international community is genuinely interested in ending and preventing starvation in the Gaza Strip, it must support and ensure Palestinian liberation. Thank you.
Thank you, Special Rapporteur, for organizing this space. As colleagues have underlined, the backdrop of the ongoing genocide is the settler colonial apartheid regime, whose one of the main instruments used by this regime is the continuous targeting of Palestinian land upon which Palestinian people live and exercise their livelihoods, including agricultural land and related resources, central to the whole notion of food sovereignty. And food sovereignty is not possible without land sovereignty. And land sovereignty, as understood in the literature, is the right of peoples to have effective access, use, and control over land and the benefits of its use. So in effect, for decades, there has been ongoing hollowing of the pillars of food sovereignty of the Palestinian people, which in turn enables the continuation of the settler colonial apartheid regime. And businesses have been involved in many ways and forms in the strategies and instruments of this regime. The 2013 report of the independent fact-finding mission to investigate the implications of the Israeli settlements have showed that business enterprises have directly and indirectly enabled, facilitated, and profited from the construction and growth of the settlements. And the persistent expansion and related violence of the settlement enterprise continue to be a root cause of many violations of Palestinians' human rights and constitute some of the main factors perpetuating the prolonged and belligerent occupation by Israel. So the corporate involvement in the settlement enterprise appears in many facets, among which is the involvement in land confiscation to construct and expand settlements, demolitions and destruction of agricultural farms, olive groves, crops, houses, and population transfer. Also, corporations have been involved in unlawful extraction and exploitation of Palestinian natural resources such as stone, gas, and agricultural products. The web of activities through which corporations get involved and provide support to this illegal settlement economy and settlement-related activities extend to financial transactions, investments, purchases, importation of settlement products, procurements, provision of services, among other economic and financial activities. So corporations have exacerbated the unfolding crimes through direct action and through complicity in the occupiers' actions. And this is how several corporations have become part and parcel of a system that oppresses Palestinians and violates their rights and food sovereignty. And today, in the context of a genocide unfolding, there is flagrant business as usual approach by many corporations, including multinationals operating in the occupied Palestinian territories. So accountability in this context requires holding companies responsible for their involvement in these illegal activities and violations of international human rights and humanitarian law. And this should include the accountability for the direct commission of violations and for the complicity in violations. And international human rights law is clear and already sets requirements from states and to regulate and to take action in regards to their business activities. The guiding principles on business and human rights took us a step forward in terms of consolidating a restatement of these obligations and responsibilities. Definitely more ought to be done in terms of clarifying these norms under international and domestic law. But in the meantime, the gap in implementation and continuous impunity ought to be addressed. So the guiding principles require that businesses avoid adverse impacts of their activities on human rights. And in this context, the context of Palestine, this means avoiding contributing to the establishment, maintenance, development, or consolidation of Israeli settlements or the exploitation of natural resources of the Palestinian people. In regards to the obligations of states, the guiding principles clearly provide that in conflict-affected areas, specific active steps are required from states vis-à-vis their businesses, and those are clearly addressed under Principle 7. that says that because of the risk of gross human rights abuses that are heightened in conflict-affected areas, states should help ensure that business enterprises operating in these contexts do not get involved in these abuses. And to do that, states are required to engage at the early stage with businesses to identify and prevent and mitigate human rights related risks of their activities and of their business relationships. And this requires obliging and putting an obligation on businesses to undertake and communicate, so thus make public, human rights impact assessments of their activities and their business relationships. The other requirement under the guiding principles standard is that states should ensure that their current policies, legislation, regulation, and enforcement measures are effective to deal with these heightened possibilities of human rights abuses. And so to do that, the states need to take measures to ensure that the businesses that are domiciled in their territory or under their jurisdiction or are owned or controlled by them refrain from committing or contributing, enabling or benefiting from the abuses of Palestinian human rights. And the guiding principles are clear to say that this requires exploring civil, administrative, or criminal liability where needed, especially in regards to enterprises that commit abuses and do not respond to these requirements. Also, the guiding principles speak of denying access to public support and services for business enterprises that are involved with such kind of abuses. So clearly, what is required from states is action beyond mere provision of guidance or encouragement to their businesses. The United Nations has already published a database listing businesses operating in illegal Israeli settlements in violation of international human rights and humanitarian law. But unfortunately, the countries where these businesses are based, including the United States, the UK, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Spain, and France, are yet to enact effective measures to hold their corporations accountable. I will close by saying in this moment, it is of utmost importance for multilateral action to be undertaken. The guiding principles already call upon states to undertake collective action to prevent and address the involvement of businesses in human rights abuses and to support effective collective initiatives in this regard. I thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Special Rapporteur Michael Fakhri for this timely event, and thanks goes to my colleagues, Ambassador of Ireland, Qatar, and Pakistan, and for the panelists. I think that you heard a lot. I have nothing to add, but maybe it's useful to update you on the latest casualties we received today morning from the Minister of Health in Palestine. Now we have more than 30,630 martyrs killed by the Israelis. About 70% of them are women. We are talking about 8,100 and 2,750 children. And the others are civilians, the majority, by the way. Some of them are elderly, some of them are special needs. Well, maybe there is some of those Hamas fighters, but the majority, they have no relation with that. Because some they are trying to say that they are targeting the Hamas fighters. And when they want to do that, they can make it without targeting the civilians. And I think that you witnessed what's happening in Beirut with the deputy of Hamas leadership. But they are using always this justification that Hamas using the civilians as a human shields, and this fake news and this information that they succeeded to spread at the beginning by the 40 beheaded and the rape, etc. Many of those stories. But in principle, as we always insisting that we don't trust any from the Israeli
claims without any independent investigation. So if they are willing, as the only democracy in the region, they have to allow the fact-finding mission, the UN mission, to go and to investigate, and anyone committed to any violation should be accountable, because we strongly believe that without accountability there is no justice, and without social justice there is no peace. That's the guilt that the Palestinians are committed. I heard Yasmeen was saying something on the history of the Palestinians in Palestine. If you don't know, to remind you that the Palestinians are there before Judaism, before Christianity, before Islam. And we are the Palestinians, we are Jews, we are Christians, and we are Muslims. But Smotrich, who came from Smotria in Ukraine, he have no right to tell me that this is his grandfather's land. This is ours. And we have a lot of our Palestinian Jews who is fighting with us to end the Israeli occupation led by the Zionism, and now the religious one. This is the worst formula of Zionism. And you know the names like Smotrich, Ben Gvir, and the Prime Minister of Israel, Netanyahu, the one who said on the event of 17th of October, if you remember, after the attack on Al-Ahl hospital, when they killed more than 400 Palestinian civilians sheltering on this place, because the hospitals is one of the protected objects. They killed 400 of them. But Netanyahu said on the X, on his cabinet, this Twitter, he said the fight between us and Hamas is the fight between the children of light and the children of darkness. So this is the mentality of the democracy in the region that trying to claim that they are representing in the Middle East. And I think that the topic that we are discussing, the starvation and now it's around famine in the region. Maybe you know the history of Palestine. Palestine before 1947 was the food basket for the region. Maybe you heard that. When you heard about the Orange Jaffa and the other agricultural products, it was being distributed for all the region. So it was a very rich and productive country. But what's happened in 1947, which is injustice by the General Assembly to divide Palestine for two states. One is existing, and this one did also catastrophes and aggression against the Palestinians. They took half of what was being designed at that time, and they expelled more than 900,000 Palestinians. Now those are around 6.5 million Palestinian refugees around the world. And in Gaza, maybe you are aware that 70% of the Gazans are refugees. They were being expelled from the villages and the cities around Gaza Strip. So now they are, for the second time, forcibly, the Israeli occupying power are trying to expel them from Gaza and transfer them from Gaza. And it's the same story when it comes to the West Bank. The idea is still there, because maybe you heard the announcement by different Israeli leaders that they don't want to see any Palestinian, Christian or Muslim or any between the river and the sea. That the Holy Land, our historical Palestine, is belong to them, and it's the God promise. But the God, he didn't told us the same story. If it's the God is the same one. When it comes to the humanitarian aid, I think there is something here which I don't agree with the negotiations and the Americans, what they are doing, and maybe the Qatari delegation, they know it, and the Egyptian, to make the humanitarian aid as a negotiating card. This is a must, this is a duty, this is a responsibility for Israel as an occupying power, according to the international law, according to the Geneva Convention. Maybe you know the Article 55, 59, etc. So it's not a gift if the Israelis are opening, and they have to open all the crossing borders with Gaza. There is 6, not only Rafah. Now they are concentrating on Rafah. Why Rafah? But before it was open, all of that. And now some they are trying to do a show by throwing some meals from the air. And enough with this game. If any is going to use that for an election campaign, we don't agree. and especially the Americans, if they are serious, they should stop their veto at the Security Council, the body who can decide on going to a ceasefire and to allow the humanitarian aid to enter to Gaza. But the idea was very clear from 9th of October, if you remember the announcement by the killer Glant, the minister of the Israeli occupying power, when he said that we are going to cut the electricity, food, fuel, and medicine. So there is nothing here. I am in touch with my colleagues every day, several times in Gaza. It's terrible. No one can describe that. And today I received also a new number of the children died because of the malnutrition, 18 of them, children. And the hydration, maybe you are following, the starvation, you are following it. So, and the Israelis, they are following the tracks. Maybe you heard about last Thursday, when thousands of Palestinians were waiting for some trucks with food in Al-Rashid Street, where is Nablus Square. They attacked them, they killed 116, and they injured more than 750. What's the guilt? All those are Hamas fighters or human shields. And they did the same after 2 days in Al-Kuwait Square, also in Gaza. So also they are attacking those trucks with some of humanitarian aid. We are in need now, because of the lack of everything, for 1,000 trucks, even more than that, to try to help and to compensate what's happening, because I think Michael mentioned what's happening with the agriculture, with the fisher, ports. I heard from my colleague, he told me he tried to go to fish by his hand, by this, I don't remember what's the name of that. They start to shoot on him. Even that, and to attack some, but the ports it's totally damaged by the Israelis. So what we are now trying to do with the international community support is to take some concrete measures. Maybe I think that maybe Michael mentioned the UNRWA, because of oral claims by the Israelis that 12 of the UNRWA staff, they were participating on 7th of October. It's oral, without any evidence. And I think the UNRWA did mistake when they suspend those 12 people without investigation. And now some countries, they announce that they are suspending or freezing the aid. And you know that UNRWA is the biggest organization or UN body that providing the relief for the Palestinians in Gaza. Now there is a gap, but we are thankful for those principal countries that they announced that they will continue and increase. One of them, my colleague, Ambassador of Ireland, and other countries like Norway, Spain, etc. And the people, they start to realize, if there is any claims after the investigation, they can take any accountable measures, but not to punish the UNRWA and the beneficiary from UNRWA, because UNRWA is serving the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon, Syria, in Jordan, in West Bank, and in Gaza. So something is not clear for us what's going around. Because I think that time is running, and we have, after we now the Arab ambassadorial meeting, so I will stay on. I think that all of you should raise your voice for ceasefire. This is the main goal now. Enough watching genocide. The ICJ rulings 26th of January, it's not respected by the Israelis. And you know what's going on now, even with this humanitarian aid, it's a violation of the Article 2 of the Convention or preventing a genocide. The second thing, we are asking all the countries to stop transfer the arms to Israel if they are serious on that. And we are expecting that some countries should take some measures in line with the Geneva 4. Go to the Article 146, 147, 148. Reconsider the trade relations, the diplomatic one. Don't tell me that we stand behind the two-state solution and the Israelis are taking everything in the West Bank, and their goal is to expel all the Palestinians and to commit, as the ICJ ruling genocide against them. So I think it's a shame on the international community until now that we are watching this genocide. We know that the Second World War sudden catastrophes, but we didn't saw it, especially our generation. Yes, I'm old a little bit. But now we are watching that, and no one is moving. And suddenly they start to describe what's going there in Gaza. We don't need your description. We know it, we live it, we watch it every day. Please, we want you to stop that in the 21st century. It's a shame. And if we continue in this way, we are going to increase or to empower the law of jungle. It will hit later everyone in all the capitals. So once again, I hope that we will meet with you in different circumstances and to go, all of us and all of you and all the voices, to end the root causes of that, the occupation. Without solving that, there is no security for Israel and no security for the region and for the world, because the Palestinians are the people of Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, everyone, and to the panelists. We are just going to have to stop immediately since there's another meeting. So I appreciate everyone's time today, and good luck.